It started, like most unsettling things do, with something completely ordinary. A calendar notification. Therapy, 5 p.m. Thursdays. I'd seen it on my wife's phone before, but I never questioned it. Why would I? We were solid. We shared playlists and grocery lists, inside jokes and outside problems. She'd been seeing her therapist for over a year, ever since her dad passed away, and I respected that space. I never pried. Until one Thursday when I stopped by her office to surprise her with dinner and saw her car pulling out of the lot at 4:57 p.m. Early, I thought. But then I watched as she turned left, away from the direction of her therapist's office. I followed. I told myself I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just curious. Maybe therapy had moved, or she had an errand. But then she parked in front of a small brick building with no signage. Not a clinic. Not even a business. Just a plain door, the kind that looks like it belongs to storage units or forgotten basements. She stepped out of the car, checked her phone, and went inside. No knock. Just entered like she belonged. I stayed across the street, heart thumping. 15 minutes passed. Then 30. I almost got out and went up myself. But what was I going to say? Hi, I'm spying on my wife? So I left. That night, I asked her how therapy went. She smiled, touched my hand, and said, heavy, but helpful. I nodded and said nothing. But inside, something cracked. The next Thursday, she left at the same time, drove the same route, and entered the same door. I watched again. Still no sign. Still no answers. So I did something I knew I couldn't walk back. I waited until she came home, told her I had a late work call, and went to that building myself. The door wasn't locked. Inside was a single hallway with 4 unmarked doors. One was slightly ajar. I peeked in. What I saw made my breath stop. Not therapy. Not anything close. Inside the room was a circle of chairs, but not the kind you'd expect at a support group. These were high-backed, upholstered, with embroidered names stitched on the headrest covers. Only 2 people sat there. An older woman with a gray bun and a young man flipping through a leather-bound book. Neither looked up. There was a table in the center with a single lit candle and a small, framed photo. I couldn't see the image, just the glint of glass. I backed away quickly and ducked into the shadows as another person walked past me in the hallway. A teenage boy with headphones around his neck and a nervous look in his eye. He didn't knock either. Just opened a different door and stepped inside. Each door, I now realized, must lead to something different. I didn't dare try another. Instead, I slipped back outside and drove home, my mind racing. When she walked through the door at 8:01 p.m., right on schedule, I kissed her like nothing was wrong. But everything was wrong. The next morning, I called the number listed under her therapist contact, just to hear the voicemail. It was a generic greeting. No name. No doctor, nothing. I Googled the address. Nothing came up. I searched property records. The building was leased under a shell company called Marigold Services LLC. Their listed address? A P.O. box in Idaho. My stomach dropped. Thursday came again, and I followed again. Same pattern. Same door. This time, I waited longer. At exactly 7:59, she came out. But she looked different. Not tired like after a hard session. Not relaxed. Almost distant. As if she hadn't been talking, but absorbing something too big to hold. She sat in her car for a full 5 minutes before driving off. And that was when I made my second irreversible decision. I called in sick the next day and went back to the building alone. I chose the door she'd used. Opened it slowly. Empty. Just the circle of chairs. The candle still burned. But this time, something had changed. There was a note on the nearest chair. My name was written on it. I stared at that note like it had teeth. My name, written in perfect block letters. No envelope. Just a folded slip of white paper sitting on a chair that suddenly felt far too personal to touch. But I touched it. I opened it. 5 words. You're asking the wrong question. That's it. No signature. No explanation. Just that sentence. My breath shortened. I looked around the room again. Still empty. The candle flickered. The framed photo on the table now faced me. And when I stepped closer to look, I nearly dropped the note. It was a picture of my wife. But not a photo I had ever seen. She looked younger. Her hair was shorter. She stood next to a man I didn't recognize, holding hands and laughing like they shared a private world. The background looked like a cabin. Snow in the distance. A memory I didn't belong in. I snapped a photo of it with my phone, folded the note again, and slipped out as quietly as I could. My brain burned. That night, I told myself I had to confront her. I even rehearsed it. But when I saw her at dinner, humming to herself while flipping through a cookbook, I couldn't do it. I was too afraid of the answer. The next day, I searched our attic, our basement, old drawers, photo albums. I didn't know what I was looking for. That cabin, maybe. That man. Anything. I found nothing. Until I remembered something strange. 2 months ago, she got a new phone. Said the old one just stopped working. She didn't back up any of her photos. They were just old stuff, she'd said with a shrug. It didn't mean anything to me then. Now it felt like a thread, and I was pulling at it hard. That night, when she fell asleep on the couch, I quietly took her phone and opened her health app. Thursday logs were missing. Always. No steps recorded. No heart rate data. Gaps. But this time, I noticed something I hadn't before. Under connected devices, there was a listed wearable, an old fitness tracker I didn't recognize. Paired, but not hers. I searched the serial number online. It wasn't sold publicly. It was part of a beta test program by a company called Verse. I clicked through forums and dead-end pages. Then I found something. A comment from 3 years ago. Verse isn't about health. It's about memory. The phrase rattled around in my head like a marble in a jar. Verse isn't about health. It's about memory. What did that even mean? I clicked on the user who posted the comment. The account was deleted. Of course it was. But someone had replied before that happened. I did the Thursday sessions too. Thought I was healing. Turns out I was forgetting. That word. Forgetting. I read it again. I closed my laptop and just sat there in the dark, trying to understand what any of this could mean. Therapy. A fake address. A strange door. A secret photo. And now memory? It sounded paranoid. Science fiction. But something about it felt true in that uncomfortable, cold hands kind of way. I went back to that strange building the next morning. Parked across the street. Watched. An hour passed. 2. And then the older woman with the gray bun, the one I'd seen in the circle, stepped out. She crossed the street to a small coffee shop. I followed her in. I didn't have a plan. Just instinct. I got in line behind her and said, "Excuse me. I think we know the same person." She turned slowly. Her eyes weren't surprised. More like, resigned. "You're her husband," she said quietly. "You shouldn't be here." "What is this place?" I asked. "What happens in that room?" She studied me for a long time before answering. "It's not about what happens in the room. It's about what you leave behind when you leave it." "That's not an answer," I said, voice tight. She nodded slightly. "Because you're still asking the wrong question." That phrase again. My fists clenched. "Then what's the right one?" She paused. "What don't you remember?" I opened my mouth. Closed it again. "Ask her," she said, and turned away before I could respond. That night, I did. I finally asked. "What don't I remember, Anna?" She blinked at me across the dinner table, fork paused halfway to her mouth. "What?" "Thursday nights," I said. "The building. The door. The candle. The photo. What don't I remember?" For a second, I saw something behind her eyes flicker. Not fear. Not guilt. Grief. And then, finally, she whispered, "You really don't know, do you?" I felt my entire body tense. "Know what?" I asked, the air between us suddenly thick, like it had been holding its breath for months. Anna didn't move. She didn't cry. She just looked at me like someone bracing for a wave. "We had a son," she said. My vision blurred for a second. "What?" "His name was Theo." I blinked. "No, we didn't. We've never had kids." She nodded slowly, painfully. "That's what you remember." My stomach turned. "What are you talking about?" She stood up, walked out of the room, and returned with a worn box. Inside, photos. A little boy. Brown curls, gap-toothed smile, familiar eyes. "Ours." "That's not possible," I whispered. "I would remember." She handed me a birth certificate. His name, our names, dates, hospital stamp. "You did," she said softly. "You were everything to him." The room swam around me. "Where is he?" The answer came so slowly it hurt. "Gone. 3 years ago. There was an accident." I shook my head. "No. I'd know. I'd remember the hospital. The funeral." She placed another paper in front of me. A consent form. My signature. Request for memory disassociation procedure. Subject, Theo Barnes. My own handwriting. "We both did it," she said. "We couldn't function. You were spiraling. You begged them to take it from you. You said you couldn't live with it." "I don't understand," I said. "You chose to forget," she said. "Every Thursday, I go back because I couldn't. I needed to remember alone." My hand shook. I stared at the photo of the boy I didn't know but already loved. "Why didn't you tell me?" "They warned me. If I tried to break the memory wall, it could destroy you." "But I didn't leave clues." "Not until you started asking questions." "The note," I murmured. "The photo." She nodded. "I wanted you to find it when you were ready. But maybe none of us ever are." I stood up, heart racing, chest tight. "I need to see him," I said. "I need to remember." And she nodded. Then come with me. Tomorrow. To the circle. The next evening felt like walking into a second life I had somehow signed away. The sun dipped below the buildings as Anna drove us in silence. We pulled up to the same brick structure, that ordinary facade that had quietly held my past for years. I followed her inside. No more hiding. The hallway was just as I remembered, dim, hushed, almost reverent. She led me to the familiar room, the circle of chairs, the candle still flickering in the center. The air smelled faintly of wax and lavender. Already seated were the gray-haired woman, the teenage boy, and two new faces, a man in his 60s gripping a cane, and a woman maybe 10 years younger than me holding a small stuffed rabbit. No one spoke. Anna sat down. I sat beside her. The woman with the bun, Mara, I learned, nodded at me. "Do you consent to restore?" she asked. Her tone was soft, but carried weight. I nodded, unsure if I was ready, sure only that I had to try. She turned to the table and opened a small case. Inside were two devices, one like a headset, the other more like a speaker. Anna reached over and squeezed my hand. "It won't be all at once," she said. "It'll come like fog clearing." I nodded again. Mara handed me the headset. "Close your eyes." I did. The room faded. A low tone began to hum in my ears. Then a snapshots. A blue blanket. Crayons melted in the backseat. Laughter from a tiny mouth. A bubble wand. A pair of untied sneakers and the sound of tiny feet racing across hardwood. Theo. His name came with a rush of warmth and sorrow so fierce I nearly gasped. My eyes flew open. I couldn't breathe. He had a dimple, I said. Just one. Anna's eyes welled with tears. On his left cheek, she whispered. And then more came. Christmas morning. A fort made of couch cushions. Him falling asleep on my chest during a thunderstorm. But then sirens. Screaming. Water. Shouting. A hospital hallway. Blinding light. My knees gave out and I collapsed forward, elbows on my knees, face in my hands. I remembered. All of it. The joy. The horror. The impossible weight of love and loss. "You asked them to take it," Anna said. "You begged them. You said if they didn't, you'd follow him." My voice cracked. "And you carried it all alone." "I had to," she said. "I couldn't lose you too." The group around us remained quiet, as if bearing witness was part of the healing. I sat up slowly. "Is it permanent now?" I asked Mara. She shook her head. "Memories restored fade slower than they're erased. It will stay if you let it. But only if you want it." I looked back at the photo of Theo on the table. I reached for it, held it, and nodded. I want it. That night, we drove home wordlessly, the kind of silence that feels less like emptiness and more like awe. I didn't sleep. I stayed up in Theo's old room, the one I'd walked past 100 times thinking it was just a guest room. The same walls. The same quiet. But now filled with everything I had once let go. I wasn't ready for the grief. But maybe grief was the price of having loved him at all. The next few days were strange. Not painful exactly, more like wearing clothes that didn't fit the same anymore. I moved through our house like I was retracing steps in a dream, only now I knew what each shadow meant. The dent in the wall by the stairs? Theo had rammed his tricycle into it trying to do a spin. The crayon mark on the hallway baseboard? His first attempt at writing his name. All of it was here, tucked beneath layers I hadn't known existed. And the worst part was how easily I had lived without it. That was the part that gutted me. I had forgotten how to miss him. Anna handled it better, or maybe she just masked it deeper. She made tea, played old songs on the kitchen speaker, hummed while folding laundry. But at night, I could hear her crying softly in the bathroom, water running to cover the sound. On Sunday, we returned to the circle. Voluntarily, this time. I wanted to ask Mara questions, wanted to understand how this all worked, who they were, how memories could be surgically removed and returned without so much as a trace. But she never answered directly. "Some memories are too loud to stay," she said. "Others are too quiet to lose." It wasn't science. It was something more fragile. Something human. One of the new participants, a man with sunken cheeks and trembling hands, spoke about his brother. Another shared a letter her mother wrote before choosing to forget her final diagnosis. No one judged. No one tried to fix it. It was the most silent form of honesty I'd ever witnessed. After the meeting, as we were leaving, Mara pulled me aside. "There's something else," she said, slipping a sealed envelope into my hand. "You requested this when you first came." I stared at it. "I did." She nodded. "You said if you ever chose to remember, this would help you decide what to do next." The envelope had my name on it. The handwriting was mine. I didn't open it until I got home. I sat in Theo's room again, surrounded by the ghosts of bedtime stories and dinosaur stickers, and I opened the letter. Inside was a single sentence. "If you remember this, it means you chose the pain, so don't waste it." Below that was a second line. "You know where to go." My heart dropped. Because I did. I didn't tell Anna about the letter right away. Some part of me felt like this was something I had to do alone, even if it made no logical sense. You know where to go. The phrase echoed in my mind as I drove aimlessly through town, passing the park, the grocery store, the hospital. Nothing sparked. Nothing clicked. But then, while stuck at a red light, I saw it. A narrow road with an old sign half covered in ivy. Hollow Pines Trailhead. I didn't remember it, but my hands turned the wheel anyway. The road was familiar in a way that made my bones ache. The trees curved like a memory, and when I pulled into the gravel lot at the end of the lane, I knew. We'd been here. Not often. Just once. For Theo's birthday. His last one. I walked the trail, heart racing. It was overgrown but still passable. A bend led to a small clearing with a wooden bench, worn and moss-covered. And there, carved into the backrest in crooked little letters, TB6. I sat. I couldn't move. I just let the wind and the silence press down around me. Then I saw it, tucked behind a nearby tree, a metal tin half buried in dirt. My fingers dug instinctively. Inside were drawings. Crayon stick figures. A red sun. A dog. A messy attempt at spelling daddy. Theo's art. I held the paper to my chest and sobbed like my ribs had cracked open. That's when I heard the crunch of footsteps behind me. I turned. It was Anna. She said nothing. Just knelt beside me, pulled out her own tin. I came back here a year after, she whispered. Buried these. I didn't think you'd ever remember. But I hoped. I reached inside. Her tin held a small photo, a candid of the three of us. Blurry but beautiful. A lock of hair tied in blue ribbon. A note in her handwriting. He loved you best when you made pancakes. We sat there until the sun dipped low, the sky burning pink and gold. You remember the trail, she said softly. I didn't think you would. I didn't, I admitted. But something in me did. We buried the tins again, side by side this time, and placed a small rock on top like a marker. I think we're supposed to start again, I said. Not over. Just forward. She nodded. But with him this time. Not without. Grief doesn't leave, it shifts. That's what I learned in the weeks that followed. It stopped ambushing me in the cereal aisle or when I heard a child's laugh echo across a playground. Instead, it settled into quieter places. The moment before sleep, the way sunlight hit the empty chair at the breakfast table, the sound of a door creaking in a house that now remembered. Anna and I fell into a rhythm again. A new one. We didn't pretend things were normal, because they weren't, and never would be. But we didn't have to tiptoe anymore. We started talking about Theo. Out loud. We said his name. We laughed about the time he fed an entire loaf of bread to the neighbor's dog. We cried about the morning he asked if heaven had Legos. And slowly, our house filled with more than silence. On the second Thursday after my memory returned, I went back to the circle alone. I didn't tell Anna. I just felt I needed to. When I walked in, Mara was already there. She looked up, unsurprised. You remembered the way, she said. I nodded and took a seat. The teenage boy from before was there too. His name was Jacob. He talked about his sister this time, how she used to braid his hair when their parents fought in the other room. She's still alive, he said, but I chose to forget the day she left because I told her to go. I didn't mean it, but I didn't want to feel like I'd caused it. I nodded. I understood that kind of guilt. When it was my turn, I spoke for the first time. We had a son. I forgot him. I asked them to take it away. No one gasped. No one judged. They just listened. I kept going. Now I remember. And it's like reintroducing myself to my own life. Mara smiled softly. And how does that life feel? I hesitated. Heavier. But more mine. She nodded like she'd been waiting to hear that. After the session, she walked me to the door. Not everyone who comes here chooses to remember. Some just want a place to carry the weight together. Is that what this place is? I asked. A memory circle? She shook her head. It's not about remembering or forgetting. It's about choosing your truths and learning how to live beside them. I stepped outside into the cool evening air, feeling more awake than I had in years. I didn't have all the answers, but I finally had my why, and that was enough for now. A week later, Anna placed something unexpected on the kitchen table between us, a photo album. Leather-bound, faded along the edges. I found it in the attic, she said. I didn't know if you'd want to see it, but I thought we could look together. My hands hovered for a moment before flipping the cover open. Inside were moments I couldn't believe had ever slipped through my fingers. Theo in a Halloween costume, tiny firefighter, helmet too big for his head. Theo holding a sparkler in the driveway, eyes wide with wonder. Theo asleep in my arms on a couch I barely remembered owning. Some of these weren't in the memory restoration, I said quietly. Anna nodded. Some things can't be restored by a headset. Only by time. We didn't finish the album that night. It was too much. But we did start a new one. We added photos of the two of us now, gray around the edges, a little worn but still standing. Still choosing. Then one afternoon, an envelope arrived in the mail. No stamp. Just our names, handwritten. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Printed at the top, verse, termination confirmation. This is from them? I asked. Anna nodded. I got mine last week. The form stated that our file, identification code 2032B, had been officially closed. Memory reintroduction deemed stable, it read. Voluntary closure acknowledged. Site access terminated. It felt cold, final, and strangely comforting. Like closing a chapter, but not the book. I folded the paper and placed it inside the new photo album. A reminder of what we chose, what we reclaimed. That weekend, we went to the clearing again. The trail had still overgrown, but now it felt sacred instead of forgotten. We brought 2 small wind chimes and hung them from the tree above the buried tents. They made the softest sound in the breeze, like laughter in a memory you're not sure was real. We didn't speak much. We didn't need to. But as we walked back toward the car, Anna slipped her hand into mine and whispered, "You found your way back." I squeezed her hand gently. "You left me breadcrumbs. I was afraid you'd never follow them." "I almost didn't," I admitted. But something in me knew. "You think it was him?" I nodded. "Yeah, I do. That night, I had a dream. Not the hazy kind you forget by breakfast. This one stayed with me, sharp around the edges. In it, I stood in our backyard, the grass damp beneath my feet. The wind moved gently, and in the middle of it all, Theo sat cross-legged, building something with blocks. He didn't look up, but I knew he knew I was there. "What are you building, buddy?" I asked. He shrugged without looking. "Something that lasts." I knelt beside him. "You remember me?" "Of course," he said, like it was the silliest question in the world. "But you forgot me." I felt tears prick behind my eyes. "I'm sorry." "It's okay," he said, finally turning to me. "You had to go away to come back. I knew you would." I reached for him, but he was already fading. "Don't go," I whispered. "I'm not," he said. "You are." I woke up with his voice still in my ears. Anna stirred beside me. I didn't tell her about the dream. Not because I wanted to keep it from her, but because it felt like a message just for me. A gift. That day, we did something we'd avoided since memory returned. We visited his grave. It was tucked in the far corner of the cemetery, under a tree that always dropped more leaves than it should. The headstone was simple. Just his name, dates, and the line Anna had chosen, always building something that lasts. I hadn't remembered why that phrase meant something, but now I did. We sat in silence for a while. Anna placed a small toy truck beside the flowers. I added the drawing from his tin. "He came to me," I finally said. "Last night. In a dream." She looked at me, eyes wide. "He was building something. Said he was waiting." Her lip trembled, but she didn't cry. "Maybe he still is." I nodded. "Then maybe it's time we give him something to come back to." She tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "A life. A real one. One we don't keep frozen in memories and dreams." "You mean, try again?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I think we've been surviving. Maybe it's time we try living again." She reached out, took my hand, and said the thing I wasn't sure I was ready to hear, but needed anyway. "Then let's build." 6 months later, we moved. Not far, just across town. A different house, a different rhythm. Not an escape, but a gentle reset. The new place had creaky floors, peeling paint, and a backyard just big enough for a tire swing. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. We brought only what we wanted to carry. The new photo album, the tins from the trail, we retrieved them quietly one morning, and one framed drawing, Theo's red sun and crooked stick figures, hung near the front door like a heartbeat. We started volunteering at a local center that worked with families navigating grief. We didn't share our full story, most wouldn't believe it, but we understood the language of quiet loss, of empty chairs and birthdays that sting. We smiled more. We held hands more. One afternoon, I was reorganizing the hall closet when I found it again, the letter I'd written to myself. "If you remember this, it means you chose the pain, so don't waste it." I slipped it into a new envelope and wrote a date on it. 5 years from now. Then I tucked it into a drawer with a new note. "If you're reading this, you made it through. Keep choosing." I didn't know what life would look like in 5 years, but I hoped it would include more building, more laughter, maybe even the sound of small feet again, if not through a child, then through healing, through legacy. And maybe one day we'd tell someone the whole truth. About the circle, the memory we gave up and chose to take back, the son we once had and always have. Not for drama or attention, but because sometimes the most important stories aren't the loudest. They're the ones whispered late at night, held carefully like glass, passed down with a look and a hand squeeze. I still dream of him sometimes. Not always in full color. Sometimes it's just a sound, a laugh echoing through a hallway, or the feel of a tiny hand in mine. I don't chase the dream anymore. I let it come. And when I wake, I don't cry. I get up, make pancakes, and remember. Because that's what love is. Not perfect memory, but the choice to keep showing up, even when the past tried to vanish. And I keep the wind chimes by the back window, so when they ring, I can smile and say, "Hi, buddy. We're still here."